I mean, first of all, how can I compete with Jam, who did that fantastic session just before me, and then with a title in my job description, working for a financial services company. This is so unsexy. So excuse me for that. I try to make it fun for you. First of all, I think it's actually quite fair if I tell you a little bit about myself in the beginning, just out of good manner. What I basically do is I'm more, Jam mentioned before this quadrant, and what I did not only for the company I work with right now, but also for other companies is I bring those companies into that heaven state, hopefully, most of the times. And for example, what I did in the past is for a big furnishing company, I created the strategy for their smart home. And just that you imagine the difference on if a customer comes up to you and actually says, we want to get into that market. You say like, so what are we going to offer that people really like and love? And the differences on that are sometimes very small, especially if there are already competitors out on the market. So in that case, just imagine simplicity is a very difficult thing. So you open a package, you take a bulb, which you can turn the colors on and off, and also different color sets. You plug it in and it just works. This is already a big difference to competitors where you still have to do the configuration and all of that. So this is what I would call a good user experience. On the other hand side, what you also want to achieve, this is something that I'm responsible for, is how can we actually come up with a price which is a third of the competitors. And another example out of previous jobs is I used to work with a large or one of the leading European energy companies, and typical scenario, they worked before with global consultancies, and since nuclear energy as well as coal is not the hippest thing anymore, they came up with 4 different pillars for their future business, like for example, big data, smart home, etc. So when you think about those 4 topics by itself, I don't think that they're very customer-centric because, okay, they're quite hyped. A lot of people talk about big data, but what kind of value do we bring to the customer? In that case, we started and extracted the smart home topic because it was originally towards the elderly. So imagine what kind of service do you offer as a smart home for the elderly? And when you go out into the field and do some research, you figure out not all old people, what you first would imagine, are very ill and sick if they are over 80. Some of them are quite in a healthy state. So what we identified back then is that this offering is more about a transitional moment in life. So whenever you have a change in life, you can come up with products that make your life easier. But today, this was just 2 examples out of previous work, that you get an understanding how I try to identify what a customer really needs and wants. And I just brought along a target group that I really fancy a lot, which is around the super freelancer, as I would call them. So let's do a little dive into that. The super freelancer actually is a new generation of independent workers. And you have probably heard already the terms like digital nomad. A digital nomad is usually a person who goes out, is not dependent to one company anymore, is a freelancer, goes out to wherever he wants or she wants, and is working from a place which probably costs them 10% of the usual daily costs, and they can work remotely by digital technology. And just to show you the difference on that, I don't want to put you into a box, but sometimes when I do a talk, a lot of people work in that quadrant, which is a long-term employee, and I went through that myself in older jobs, like you're quite happy if you can arrive at the job at 10 instead of 8:30 or something like that, super happy, and then you get like a day off more than your average employee. So this is like an old school mentality, the state of mind, which what we all wanted to fancy. On the other hand side, this is what you can observe right now. There's a high demand on freelancer. So not only for startups, also for huge corporations. They are searching for very specialized freelancers. And if you look at their freedom and their daily rates, it's quite interesting. But again, I'm talking today about a super freelancer, which is a very entrepreneurial person, which can work from anywhere in the world. Just to prove that these people already exist, and this is a real-life example. I know John since quite a while. He actually is a serial entrepreneur. He built a couple of companies. Originally in Japan, he built like one of the biggest recipe platforms in Japan. On the other hand side, since the last couple of years, he's running his business out of Thailand. So he brings in the people he's working with. He's working from Thailand with a tiny amount of money out of daily cost, and he still can work with the talent that he really wants. To show you the demand of a super freelancer, I wanted to show you a couple of examples on offerings and how that actually transforms our work, our daily work right now, but also more in the future. So let's look at those individual lone fighters. This is a hypothesis I came up with beforehand. So I will come to the data in a second, but I think in 2035, you will see that we will have even faster and even cheaper internet, even faster and cheaper air travel, lots of freelancers, I'm sorry to say no marriages anymore, and less ownership. So as I said, this is a hypothesis, so I came up with a quick data analysis on that. And let's start with the funky ones. You can see at least, I'm not saying that it is totally different in Italy, that's what I suppose, but I actually number crunched some marriage statistics from the US. So maybe it is different in Italy. But in the US, you can actually tell that the decrease of marriages over time from 1960 to 2015 is decreasing fast. And if I forecast that, we will have a time when once in a lifetime everybody got divorced, or is not living in a relationship, at least with a steady partner anymore. On the other hand side, this is a happy part. The flight costs, you can see it right now already, and most of you know over time that flights are getting dirt cheap. So I would say in 2035, when I did my calculations right, you can fly from Berlin to London for about 20 bucks. I mean, 20 bucks, I think we all have that. There's inflation not included in that. And on the other hand side, I hope you're not buying a home anymore. I think it's a total waste of money out of tax reasons, out of dependence reasons, etc. So there's a clear home ownership decline, but this is surely dependent on country by country.
And what is your alternative to buying a home?
Pardon?
And what is your alternative to buying a home?
I would always buy an apartment or buy a home and rent it out towards others. That's what I would do.
Or do you want to live?
Then I can have a tax reduction and I have a steady cash flow.
So you don't want to buy houses in Europe?
I would rather buy houses anywhere where I have like a good rate.
Okay.
So the offer for a super freelancer, and as I said, this is not futuristic because this is going on for years, and you probably spot a couple of examples that you already know and that are quite similar to what's going on here. So I would split those different offerings towards a super freelancer in, on the first hand side, a co-working approach. So this is basically, and I founded a co-working space back in Cologne in 2010, I think. So this is a place where not only an entrepreneur can drop by on a daily rate, opens his or her laptop, and can start to work. This is a very basic layer on the offering there, because it's so much more. It's also social communication. It is getting new jobs, new contacts, etc. And on the other hand side, it's also an educational piece because you learn from others, because I remember that we did within the first year of a co-working space about 100 events in that first year. On the other hand side, you have newer models like co-living. And co-living is basically the extension. So instead of just going there in a city that you probably not usually live, you go there, you work there, but you also live there. So you have an apartment by that vendor as well. As I said, this is already real. And this is like a little older statistics from 2015, from 2007 to 2015 on the increase of co-working spaces as a hub where people can actually go for work without having their company there on a steady basis usually. And to come up with some examples, hopefully you had the chance to visit, for example, the Beta House. They were quite early adopters, started in Berlin. Wonderful place with a lot of creatives, a lot of startups who come, who drop by there on not daily basis, with a lot of foreigners dropping by as well. It's around 5,000 squares, super interesting spot. Since some of my relatives actually live in Bali, I had the chance to go to Ubud, to the co-working space called Ubud. And this is a picture I actually took because this is actually where you work. Can you imagine escaping out of a boring office and going for work there, and later on going for a swim, etc., which is quite nice. And the people you meet there are not people from Indonesia, for example. They come from all over the world. You make some nice contacts as well. This actually got a lot of hype lately. And WeWork globally has now their co-working spaces with a lot of startups inside, and they got a couple billion funding now from SoftBank. So I will talk in a second why WeWork actually has such a high impact and why it is, out of a financial perspective, so interesting. But I think what is really kicking it right now is the co-living sphere. And I wanted to state that comment that I found from a guy called James Scott from The Collective. This is really what I hear all the time, not only at my current job, but also at previous jobs. We want to focus on millennials. And millennials, super young people, digitally raised up, digitally born, etc. And they want experiences, not possessions. I would say, in that terms of a super freelancer, I would extend that, because a super freelancer is not age dependent. It is people who have the ability, especially with the statistics I've shown before, who can fly around the world, stop at a spot, and work from there and meet new contacts and business partners. So I would extend that quote. And funnily, if you look at the real estate business right now, you have a lot of service companies, but if you think about property development, there are not a lot of companies who offer that kind of service for those kind of workers. So it is basically, yes, you can rent something, yes, you can pay something, but all the services on top of that, like social connections, etc., are not really existing. This is a place, unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to visit it so far. It's called Rome. And they have different spots in Miami, Bali, Tokyo, London, and soon San Francisco. And what they usually do is you pay a flat fee. I think it's about $1,300, and you just get a membership card. And you can travel to one of the places, and you can live there for free. You can work there for free within that membership. Just think about the cities that you see here. I highly doubt that usually you would get, for that amount of money, a space in San Francisco where you can live, where you can actually work, and where you can actually have yoga classes and all that, all those things on top.
Daily, weekly, monthly?
Monthly. So this is a really competitive price. I mean, there are additional services that they put on top of it to monetize. To show that I'm talking about serious stuff here, this is going on right now. This is a building in London, actually, by The Collective. And this is their new co-living space, as you can imagine here. I don't know how many, I think it was 400 or 500 apartments they're building there. And this is, again, 550 bedrooms, it's written in there. So this is again an indication on how big this actually gets. So why do I think this is important out of a business perspective besides showing those fancy pictures? Again, WeWork is now offering the same. They have something called WeLive, and it's apartments that you can see here, which are close by to the WeWork spaces. You can rent it on a daily basis. You also have a community. For example, you have a tablet there or an app that you can download for your mobile phone, and you can immediately connect to the community who's also living in the WeLive and WeWork space. So you can discuss about job offers, you can actually exchange and chat with the people to go out with, etc. in the evening. The interesting part is from a business perspective, I picked up those numbers, I think, from Fast Company. WeWork itself is actually pretending that the WeLive part is in the future 21% of their revenue, which is about $605 million by 2018. And the most important part, this is also something that I first didn't understand myself. If you're running a space like that, and if you're a co-working space, and if you're renting out a desk, it's not a lot of revenue that you actually, or not a lot of income that you actually make by renting a desk like that. But why is that important for the WeLive concept? What they do is, by offering that service, by attracting all the right talent, the smart people, the sexy people, I would even say, they are transforming the neighborhoods. And you've probably heard before that if Apple opens an Apple store in a mall or wherever else, they do that for a tiny amount of rental cost than their competitors or the shops next to them. The reason for that is because every mall wants to get them in, because they attract the people, they bring business to the other stores as well, so they get a special price. It is the same here with the business model from WeLive. I picked up some numbers. For example, these are only free WeWork spaces I could find, and you could see the increase of a property value over time for the co-living spaces here. So, for example, from 350 to 502 million over a time of not 2 years, so a little less than that. And I think those are quite impressive numbers, and now you get a feel why SoftBank, etc., is investing such an amount of money into that company. So, as my talk is also about artificial intelligence, and I wanted to pitch you that target group because I think it's a very, very interesting target group, because it's not only with artificial intelligence, but whenever I talk to a startup and I'm asking them, so it's a fantastic product, it's a fantastic technological solution, but what kind of problems are you actually solving and for which target group? And if you dig into that, it's most of the times quite weak. So I think I could give you something strong here with that target group, because there's a lot of potential about services that you could offer. I said it in between. So these are just a couple of thoughts that I had where you could bring value. Like, for example, drop in and get busy, which is basically finding a place to work. On the other hand side, it's education. How can we educate through artificial intelligence? And don't be worried, I'll come up with a couple of examples in a second. Then job matching. How do I find a job whenever I arrive or in my surrounding? How can I actually meet people which fit my interests? How can I offer financial services? How can I actually create a plug-and-play digital nomad experience or health and life tracking? These are all different services that you could actually offer this kind of target group. And to make it simple, I came up with 3 different service groups and a couple of examples. Those examples are quite weak, I think, in terms of artificial intelligence. That's most of the times the first example that I'm going to show. And secondly, it is always an example that is already offering a service on artificial intelligence toward that direction. So, for example, if we talk about education as a starter, I can highly recommend this platform. It's called the Investment Punk Academy. Unfortunately, I have to say it's right now only in German, but it is if you want to learn about dropshipping or Amazon FBA. Those are all terminologies, how you can make a passive income if you're a digital nomad. This is definitely a platform that you should check out. And I think it's insanely well done how they educate over the internet with different target groups. By the way, they're also working on an MBA program and until end of this year to get like final approval in Germany. But as I said, I wanted to come up with a couple of examples towards artificial intelligence on that target group. And I think the example I showed before is quite nice for Investment Punk Academy if you only are heading towards one specific skill set, which is about financials. But I don't believe in that model anymore. I mean, the company I work with right now or previous companies, I don't believe in the typical you're a technology guy, you're a designer or whatever. Because if you want to create products nowadays, you have multiple skills. And these skills are actually, if I only look at myself over time, they change. And they change even faster right now. So what we would like to have, and I think Skills Alpha, it's like a company from India. They just received their seed money. They're actually coming up with an educational platform based on your skills. And I think it's an interesting approach. I'm not saying it's perfect or anywhere near I would see a service like that, but it's a great start to actually offer something to a target group that changes quickly and that adapts new skills on a, let's say, daily basis. So, jobs to go. And this is still not driven by artificial intelligence. It's done a platform called Remote OK. It's done by, I don't know, like an early 20 WizKid. He basically built, he built a Slack channel, which I highly recommend, which is called Digital Nomads. Quite easy, that name, right? And he built 12 companies within 12 months. And all of them are profitable. One of them is Remote OK, and it's basically all based around services for digital nomads. So what you can do here as a digital nomad is a job platform, and you can find a match for mainly software engineers, DevOps, etc. With job offerings only for companies who work 100% remotely. I'm sure most of your developers use GitHub, for example, and as you know, GitHub is a remote company. They only have a tiny office in San Francisco where sometimes people drop by and the rest is spread all over the world. If we take that a little further, you have a company like Remote OK, and it was funny, I took this, the screenshot this morning and I looked for highest paid remote jobs. For example, you can have a job on machine learning for about $150,000. I'm not sure if that's a lot. On the other hand side, as I said, it's a remote job. And John, the example of a digital nomad in the beginning, he is actually living, you can follow his YouTube channel, out of $1,000 a month. He's living in a 4 or 5-star hotel in Thailand. He's actually traveling all around Indonesia all the time. And he's paying $1,000 a month, not only for the hotel, but all costs included. So think about it, if you earn like $110,000, but you only have a living cost of $1,000 a month, not a month, $110,000 a year. That would be a lot. But $1,000 living cost by month, I think that's a pretty good deal. So again, other people are on the topic for the matching of jobs, doing it in a more smarter way, I would say. These are Leap AI, are people from the AI team from Google, and they just opened their new startup, which is called Leap AI, and it's again a smarter approach, not having static lists that you have to actually add yourself, but instead they recommend you the right jobs, so you don't have to do anything. It's even related to a geolocation, so whenever you arrive at a specific spot, it can actually geo-track you. On the other hand side, you can also geo-fence a specific reason where you want to work for remotely, or specific companies, etc. I think it's a smart approach to come up with solutions. And I mean, as you all know, Google came up itself with their own job platform, so they're not the only players, but it's an interesting thing to watch. Lastly, financial services. There are, I used to work for a large bank before, and they created from Spain, and they founded a challenger bank in the UK. And the interesting part in there, it's the same like Revolut, for example, is that you don't have to struggle whenever you travel, that you have to pay the fees for money transfer, your card doesn't work, etc. So this is a global approach. So their card actually works globally, and additionally they added like a Bitcoin layer, for example, so that you can even pay with Bitcoin, which is quite distributed in the digital nomad community. They know which stores actually already accept Bitcoins, etc. And you can pay with this card as well for your Bitcoins, buy Bitcoins. It's funny, when I picked this up, I was laughing a little bit about it because this is an example that I actually took from Planet of the Apps, a horrible television or web show done by Apple. And they're one of the companies who actually pitched their business in that show. But Olivia AI is going a lot further because it helps you on your money spending. So it makes recommendations on how much money you still have, what you could invest it in, and probably on what kind of stuff you should save. And it can predict that towards the future. And imagine, you're on the road, you have to do all your arrangements, you have to overlook your spendings, etc. This is horrible for everyone who did that in their private time as a traveler. So imagine if you do that on a daily basis around the world, apps like that are actually quite supportive on that. So I think I came up with the target group. I wanted to pitch at least for you some ideas on possible services. And I created one slide as the last one that you should actually keep in mind. So this is the most important thing that you should keep in mind. Again, if my statistics are right, we will have 9 billion people. Around 6 billion people will actually work. Unfortunately, only 6 billion, or happily, we can actually choose on that. But out of those 6 billion people, 50% will be freelancers. So that basically means 1 in 3 becomes a super freelancer by the statistics. So you have a market of 3 billion. Just keep that in mind. So this is all for now. I will keep it to that chart. So if you have any further questions, please ask right now. And I'm happy to answer by mail as well.
2 questions. Health systems and what banking system?
Mm-hmm. Which banking system?
If I become a super freelancer and I go around the world and I go to Bali, I think I won't keep using my Italian bank account and bank services. And health system, if I go to Bali, I'm not a millennial, and I have to take care of my health.
Since I now come from an insurance company, I can definitely tell you about the last one. This is actually a big issue because if you have like a life insurance...
Bali, I'm sure that if I go to Bali with my insurance, they get rid of it in a short way.
But the question is how long actually your insurance actually works. With most of the insurances, it is like 6 weeks and then you're not covered anymore. So if you want to have like a global solution, this is something that still needs an offer. You have American companies who probably insure you for a couple of countries, not all. So right now, I don't think there's a clear solution. And when it comes to banking with Revolut, it's already one suggestion. With a bank, as a challenger bank, I think they have like 200 something million of funding so far. But they're still not there as a service. It's nice that you can pay in at each ATM, etc. But this is very basic stuff. As I said, this is not a good service. A good service is that they take care of you and under all circumstances. So coming back to your questions, I don't think right now there's a good insurance company who's offering that kind of service, as well as a banking company who does that. And not in a smart way, not at all.
Just for me to get it right, and your question is actually triggering that in my mind. So if I see that right, your projection is ending up producing an opportunity based on a certain target group, because the same question you asked and similar questions would indicate that there is a long list of services and situations we can create as various startups to feed exactly this upcoming trend.
Yeah.
Is that right? Am I reading it right?
Yes, and it's coming back to the example with an energy company I said in the beginning. We started with an energy company, smart home for the elderly. But if you dig a little deeper, you see that the target group is way bigger than that, because people are in different situations in life and you can offer something in that situation. So it is the same now with a super freelancer. It might be small right now, it might be younger people who travel around the world, live on an island, etc. But in the future, as we said with this, or as I said with the statistics here, if we predict that in a positive way, it will be way bigger than that. It will be 1 out of 3 persons.
I have another question. It's actually helping me to consult my clients. I have a client who is really into replacing the system of having fixed employees with having the perfect match of freelancers collaborating with their organization. How do they culturally manage that? How do they maintain quality? How do they manage to have that selection of these people sitting all over the world, helping them doing the work, and they still can keep the signature, keep the mentality, keep the, keep that identity of the organization?
That's, again, it's not only a digital solution, as I said in here. It's like a mixture of things. If you take a technology company like GitHub, they probably have, coders check in their code on GitHub. They actually see the different releases, and the communication can be done through Slack or whatever. So that might be easier with technology by itself. On the other hand side, you now have new platforms. As I said, it might. You might also have new platforms like Upwork. For example, if you need a consultant. That consultant can actually drop in a screen sharing session, and you have a one-on-one session with them. And a lot of people do that remotely. This is still not covering the social layer. The social layer comes in by the co-working spaces and co-living spaces. I'm not saying it is only purely digital, but it might be that you build up ad hoc teams at a specific venue. And on the other hand side, you also have extended workers through a remote connection.
But how would you manage the conflict raised between those people who are sitting there eating dust every day because they are the fixed employees, and then there it comes this sexy guy who says like, fuck you all, I spend only 2 hours here and then go to Bali and go to my pool. So how would you avoid, I'm trying to picture, is it a this or that? So I might have to take, press the button and switch from this style of leadership and managing my organization to the next one? Or can I generate a coexistence between a core team of fixed people who can accept that they have to come every morning, clock in, clock out for a salary, while the other sexy guy just drops in and out, depending on the project, earning a bit of money and leave?
First of all, I can tell you how others are already doing that, but I will come to that in a second. I think it's more important, that's what we have right now. Now at companies, things like design thinking is popping up as a methodology, or Google Sprints or whatever. I don't care about the buzzwords, but I care about how to educate people on dealing with ambiguity. And I think this is the toughest part. And dealing with ambiguity also means, if I talk about John and one of his startups, he's flying the people in for a certain time, then they're spread out. And this is what I also mean by dealing with ambiguity. How do you actually feel if a team only comes together for 2 days or 3 days on a specific sprint part and then is flying out back again, or is changing members in between? This is the thing what we have to be educated on. The good part is that younger people actually don't seem to not struggle with it too hard because they have the possibilities to grow up like that. If you look about, there's also a digital nomad cruise ride, so you can go on a big ship and you can go along with some other digital nomads and do that. Or the Hacker Beach is the perfect example. If you look about young people and how they actually grow up with that, it gets more natural to them. The question is, how can we transform existing employees? That's always the big question. But again, it's dealing with ambiguity, and we could talk about that for 2 or 3 hours.
I have a question.
Sure.
Don't you underestimate social aspect that people at a certain age, I mean, it's very sexy to travel around and look at the world and whatever, but at some stage you'll be seeing basically your homies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you come back to where you grew up. Because it's just, that's a certain age where you think, oh my God, nobody gotta see the world, I gotta work here, I gotta work there, I just need the jobs. They're gonna send to me and I'll work whatever. You know, it's a dream basically, more or less. But at some stage, I mean, you don't have to marry somebody, but you wanna be with somebody, or wanna have a dog, or you wanna have a cat or whatever. So these guys basically then will switch from the super freelancer maybe back to like, you know, a total normal employee.
Sure, and absolutely agree. I mean, I for myself, I mean, you can guess my age, but I can already tell you that I'm outgrown of that. Why am I not doing that myself on a 100% basis, for example? On the other hand side, I have friends who exactly do that and who are, as I am, behind 40 already. So, so there's always a black and white probably there. The question is, how does that actually evolve in the future? And if we just look at the statistics and we see it's changing, also by marriage status, etc., this might be the change. But I agree. I agree. It's not right now. We can actually. I can ask actually who actually would fancy a life like that of you. Just raise a hand if you would fancy a life like that. See, see, but the percentage is still quite low. You know, maybe I didn't show enough fancy beach pictures. So thanks for joining.